So I called a bunch of domestic violence shelters. I just looked around online and I called, but every place that I called said, we don't help men. We don't help male men at all. And I started becoming curious about why that was, because I learned that these were state-funded shelters. And I know that men pay at least half of the taxes that fund these shelters if they're state-funded. And I just was wondering why.
In the United States, there are over 2,000 domestic violence shelters. All of them serve female victims, and nearly all of them turn away male victims. In fact, as of 2016, there's only a single domestic violence shelter for men. My initial reaction was that there needed to be thousands more women's shelters because that many more women are being battered. But as it turns out, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will be victims of physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Sure, there's a slight majority of female victims, but how can that excuse denying men help? Couldn't this be considered gender discrimination? Think of it this way. Roughly 78% of all suicides are men. If suicide prevention services only served men, wouldn't we see the gender discrimination immediately? If there are over 2,000 women's shelters that turn away men, and only 1 shelter for men, obviously the resources don't match the need. A Voice for Men's editor-at-large, Erin Pizzey, founded the first ever women's shelter in 1971, and she is widely revered in the men's rights community.
Because you see, what I knew from the beginning, most domestic violence is consensual. Both are involved. Sometimes one's the perpetrator, the other plays the victim, then it crosses over. It's not as though it's just all men or all women. It's both, and occasionally innocent victims, very innocent.
Battered children grow up to batter, that's what I learnt, whether it be a man or a woman. And I now know that if a woman comes in with a history of violence in her own childhood, the chances are she will be probably violent to her children, and she will want to live on this knife edge of crisis and danger.
I haven't been allowed to speak, that's the difficulty.
Why is that?
Because I'm completely barred from all conferences. I'm not allowed to walk up the step of my own refuge. I bought the bloody building. But no, because there's feminists, the woman who runs it is a very heavy feminist. She won't have anything to do with me.
What did you say that made them hate you?
That women could be equally as violent as men. That was from the beginning.
On the whole issue of domestic violence, that's just another word, really. It's a cleanup word about wife beating, because that's really what it is, or dating violence. And it's not girls that are beating up on boys. It's boys that are beating up on girls and using violence to intimidate and to control. And we have very few what's called domestic violence shelters, which are places that women can leave their home with their children and get a new start, get out of the violence. But there are not nearly enough of them. We need more funding and more resources, because it is a tremendous disadvantage for women and girls.
In 2014, the CDC released a report revealing that over 5.4 million men and 4.7 million women had been victims of intimate partner physical violence within the previous 12 months. But then why does the media paint domestic violence as a women's issue?
The World Health Organization says 1 in 3 women are abused by their partner.
1 in 3 American women experiences domestic violence or stalking at some point in her life.
And when it was addressed as a men's issue, the speaker's point was that it's a men's issue because men are the problem.
What's going on? Why do so many men abuse physically, emotionally, and verbally and other ways the women and girls and the men and boys that they claim to love? What's going on with men?
So why aren't men's rights activists and feminists working together? Michael Kimmel briefly said something that made me wonder. He said it would no longer be a gender problem if both men and women were equally victims of domestic violence. Is that why the number of male victims are never addressed?